味方、本当に味方なのですか？本当に助けてくれるのですか？
そうだ、味方だぜ。ただし正義の味方だ。
その通り助けてやるともじゃ。お前が地獄へ落ちるのを助けてやる。なあ、歌教員。
Bonds that countries form are mostly based on mutual hate towards a certain thing, be that of another country, a group of people, a different religion, so on and so forth. Along with that, the bond will be tightened by the similarities those two countries share, like for example eating similar food or having mutual respect for each other's cultures. But it should be noted that these bonds take a long time to bloom, such is the case with the countries of Serbia and Greece. The relationship between the two dates all the way back to the Middle Ages, when people died of the plague and women died at 14 during childbirth, also known as humanity's peak. Practically the two peoples first came into contact in the 6th century, when the Serbs first came to the Balkan peninsula during the Slavic migration and settled within the Greek Empire of Byzantium. Ever since, they were forced to interact with each other and form a relationship. While they consider themselves brothers now, this wasn't always the case. During the time of the Byzantines, Serbia decided to do a little trolling and use the Greek preoccupation with the Turks and Sassanids to their advantage, and revolted against their Byzantine overlords several times in the stride to create their own kingdoms and seize territory from the Greeks. The biggest bruh moment came while the Greeks were busy defending Constantinople. The Serbs decided not to send allied troops to defend Christendom, but instead decided to form an empire behind their back by invading their war-torn empire and putting parts of it under new ownership.
Titan has freed us!
Oh, I wouldn't say free. More like under new management.
While this was certainly a very bad move at the time, in the long run it paid off, given that they didn't get grouped up with other Balkanoids who never had an empire, making any criticism targeted at Serbia from other peoples that never had an empire absolutely invalid. The cooperation between the two powers was mostly non-existent at the time period, as both mostly strided for their geopolitical gains and didn't strain away from screwing over the other if that was to benefit the ruling monarch at the time. However, during the Middle Ages, they did exchange princesses with each other, which you can loosely define as some sort of cooperation, but the most important thing that united them to some extent in those dark times was their mutual hatred towards the opposite sex. Another form of medieval Serbo-Greek cooperation was at Mount Athos, which is seen as one of the most holiest sites in Orthodox Christianity. Being that it is such an important place for Christians of both Serbia and Greece, both nations banned women from even setting foot on the territory. United under one religion, kept together by their mutual hate towards women. The Balkans, ladies and gentlemen, the Balkans. But back to the topic at hand. After the Turks took control of the Balkans, both Serbs and Greeks were subject to Ottoman persecution. Being that both people groups were Christians, both had their male children taken into the Janissaries, and their great-great-grandmothers' genes forcibly altered by Central Asian haplogroups, which ironically brought the two closer together as they were both subject to the same oppression. Serbia gained their independence in 1830, while Greece gained it 9 years earlier in 1821. During their times of revolt, both countries cooperated with each other to assure victory. Many Serbian revolutionaries joined the Greek War for Independence, famous examples being Prodan Gligorijević and Vaso Brajević. Likewise, Greeks joined the Serbian uprising, famous examples being Georgakis Olympios and Naum Krnar. While Karađorđe, the leader of the first Serbian uprising, even joined the Filikieteria liberation movement, giving Serbian lands to Greeks to use as a base for operations. That handout didn't last long, and when the second Serbian uprising started, the leader of that uprising, Miloš Obrenović, was for some reason uncooperative with the Greeks, which luckily didn't damage the newly formed Serbo-Greek friendship too much. Many at the time, including Lambros Kotsonikas, a Greek veteran and historian, wanted a Greco-Serbian federation, which just speaks to what intensity the Greco-Serbian relationship grew from their mutual hate towards the Turks. Another big reason as to why Serbia and Greece have a boner for each other is that they are both Christian countries. Ew, not that kind of Christian. Yep, exactly, Orthodox. And how did they end up sharing the same religion? Well, as you may know, there was a bra moment called the Roman Empire, which grew so large that it couldn't be ruled by one leader. So, like my parents, it split. With the division of the empire, the church also split into two. Because of the many religious disagreements and political conflict, the churches couldn't really coexist with each other. For example, the church seat in Rome believed that the Pope, the religious leader of the Western Church, should have authority over the Patriarch, the religious authority of the Eastern Church located in Constantinople. Thus, Constantinople said heck no, and thus each church recognized their own leaders. Eventually, the Western Church excommunicated the Patriarch and the entire Eastern Church. The Eastern Church retaliated by excommunicating the Roman Pope. So to wrap this up, the two branches split, never united, and each country picked their own side. Serbia and Greece settled to stay Orthodox. Although in 1965 the excommunication decrees were lifted, so I guess they aren't as mad at each other as they used to be. Still, one of the many reasons why they're so close together. Another defining event of the Greco-Serbian relationship would be the Balkan Wars. During the First Balkan War, which lasted from 1912 till 1913, Greece and Serbia fought alongside one another, along with Bulgaria and Montenegro, to defeat the Ottomans and gain territory. Specifically, Greece and Serbia captured parts of Macedonia and refused to cede them to Bulgaria, as was agreed previously between the two parties, which made the Bulgarians furious. And Serbia and Greece, being the empaths that they are, sensed that their next common enemy would be Bulgaria, and they swiftly signed a mutual defensive pact opposing Bulgaria and their planned territorial expansion, which started the Second Balkan War. Bulgaria, of course, was ultimately defeated in the end by the Greeks, Serbs, and Romanians, who joined at the end to finish off the job. And thus the Serbs and Greeks won another war, fighting side by side. Another significant event for the relationship is World War I. Now, World War I is a very important period of history, especially for the Serbs. This is probably the most heroic, sacrificial, and blood-ridden event that shaped their modern mentality. During the first part of World War I, Serbia was already knee-deep in mud, resisting the German forces and later on, Bulgaria, who came back for seconds. Greece remained neutral even though the defensive pact was still in use by both parties. That is because of opposing views of the Greek Prime Minister and King Constantine I. You see, Eleftherios Venizelos, the prime minister in question, was pro-Entente, while Constantine was pro-German. This great division was resolved in 1917 when the war was nearing its end. Nonetheless, Greece joined the war alongside the Allied forces after deposing Constantine. Greece later on took in Serbian refugees. Many fallen Serbian soldiers were also buried in Greece, most notably in Thessaloniki and the Vido Island, where monuments stand honoring those who sacrificed their lives during the First World War. During World War II, the cooperation between the two during that period was mostly just based on them collectively trolling the Austrian painter until he had enough and divided their land to the pro-German allies. On the other hand, the Yugoslav wars were a different story. First and foremost, Greece was very much against the bombing of Serbia. They've shown quite a distaste towards the Europeans who voted in favor of the bombing. Greece also refused to let NATO use its airspace and air bases to advance towards Yugoslavia, and they refused to send their troops to the UN peacekeeping force. While this is yet to be proven, some experts say that Greece sabotaged NATO by leaking very classified information with Bosnian Serbs. What leads experts to believe that such a thing really did occur is the fact that NATO, somewhere around the end of the mid-90s, stopped sharing intel with Greece. Also, many Greek volunteers fought alongside the Serbs during the war, and later on, as the war came to a brutal halt, the Greeks sent supplies, food, clothes, hygiene products to Serb enclaves in Kosovo and other parts of Serbia and Bosnia. So yeah, while the Yugoslav wars were a stain in Serbia's reputation, they were also a big cooperation period between the two nations. With that, I would like to award Greece with the honorary title of war criminal, and I hope you will carry it with pride. Congratulations. Congratulations. So to sum it up, Greece and Serbia had a very rocky start with each other, but later on realized they shouldn't bully each other, but Muslims and Germans instead. Today the bond is going strong. Military and police parades between the nations are organized somewhat frequently. Serbians like to spend their summer vacation in Greece. Greeks like to visit Serbia's countryside and ski resorts, and they aid each other during natural disasters. Investments go back and forth between the two nations, and both of their churches are on good terms. All in all, it's a jolly good time with those two. May they gather enough force to reclaim Constantinople and divide Albania between the two of them. Amen. As per usual, I'd like to thank these wonderful people for supporting the channel and allowing me to make my content. Those being Julian Apostases, Mickey D, Pavan, Anthony YouTube, Roland S, Nekwa, Emanuel Donchila, Andrei Sorin Parskiv, Pudel Roz, Ramber Lads, Jožef Borat, Pisi-chan, Gergo Horvat, Seal King, Baduvu, Martin Malinkov, Egru, and Pope Pierce. You guys are awesome. My name is Janos, and you've watched Living Ironically in Europe.
Hey, hey, why are you